Jasmine Crockett was a name that many people recognized. She wasn't just another politician. She was someone who stood out in the crowd. Known for her bold speeches and fearless attitude, Jasmine had carved a niche for herself in the world of politics. Her supporters loved her because she always spoke about fairness, equality, and change. To them, she was a beacon of hope, a fighter who wasn't afraid to take on big challenges. But like every public figure, Jasmine also had her critics. Some questioned her methods, while others whispered about things they claimed weren't entirely above board. On the other side of the political spectrum stood Marjorie Taylor Greene, a woman known for being outspoken and controversial. Wherever Marjorie went, drama seemed to follow. She didn't shy away from making waves or calling out those she believed were doing wrong. While some admired her willingness to tackle tough issues head-on, others thought she crossed lines too often. Despite their differences, Jasmine and Marjorie had never really clashed directly. Sure, there were occasional jabs here and there, but nothing serious enough to make headlines. That is, until recently. Rumors had been swirling around Jasmine for weeks. At first, they were just whispers, things said quietly over coffee or during late-night conversations among insiders. People talked about certain financial decisions Jasmine's campaign team might have made. There were hints of money moving, in ways it shouldn't, and murmurs about trips paid for with funds meant for something else entirely. None of this had been proven yet, but rumors have a way of spreading quickly, especially when you're in the public eye. Marjorie Taylor Greene heard these whispers loud and clear. For her, this was more than just gossip. It was an opportunity. Marjorie prided herself on exposing what she saw as corruption, no matter how high up it went. When she got wind of the allegations against Jasmine, she knew she couldn't stay silent. If these accusations are true, Marjorie told her closest advisors, then we need to bring them into the light. Her team agreed, and soon plans were set in motion to confront Jasmine publicly. Meanwhile, Jasmine remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing behind the scenes. She was busy preparing for upcoming events, meeting constituents, and working on new policies. Politics was her passion, and she poured all her energy into making a difference. But even the strongest leaders can be caught off guard, and Jasmine was about to learn this lesson the hard way. One evening, as Jasmine scrolled through her phone after a long day of meetings, she came across a news article that stopped her cold. The headline read, "Marjorie Taylor Greene vows to expose alleged misconduct by Jasmine Crockett." Her heart sank. What could Marjorie possibly know? Was this some kind of smear campaign? Or worse, was there truth to the rumors? Jasmine tried to push the thought aside, telling herself not to jump to conclusions. Still, unease settled in the pit of her stomach. The next morning, Jasmine called an emergency meeting with her staff. "We need to prepare for whatever Marjorie throws at us," she said firmly. Her team nodded, already brainstorming strategies to counter any accusations. They reminded Jasmine of her strengths, her charisma, her ability to connect with people, and her track record of fighting for justice. Together, they vowed to stand strong no matter what happened. As days passed, anticipation grew among the public. Social media buzzed with speculation. Would Marjorie actually deliver on her promise? And if so, what evidence did she have? Supporters of both women took sides, flooding comment sections and forums with heated debates. It felt like the entire nation was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable showdown. Finally, the day arrived. A major news network announced that Jasmine Crockett and Marjorie Taylor Greene would appear together on live television to discuss pressing national issues. Of course, everyone knew the real reason for the appearance, to see whether Marjorie would follow through on her threat to expose Jasmine's alleged crimes. Tickets to attend the taping sold out within minutes, and millions tuned in online to watch the event unfold. Backstage, Jasmine paced nervously. She knew how important this moment was, not just for her career, but for her reputation. If Marjorie succeeded in discrediting her, it could ruin everything she had worked so hard to build. Taking a deep breath, Jasmine reminded herself why she entered politics in the first place. She wasn't going to let fear dictate her actions. Whatever happened, she would face it head-on. Marjorie, on the other hand, exuded confidence. Surrounded by her team, she reviewed notes and rehearsed key points. She was determined to leave no room for doubt. This wasn't personal, she kept reminding herself. It was about accountability. As the clock ticked closer to showtime, the atmosphere backstage crackled with tension. Two powerful women, each with their own agenda, were about to collide, and the world would be watching. What neither of them realized at that moment was how far-reaching the consequences of their confrontation would be. Lives would change, reputations would hang in the balance. And history would remember this day as one of the most dramatic moments in modern political history. Little did they know, the battle between Jasmine Crockett and Marjorie Taylor Greene was only beginning. The stage was set. Bright lights illuminated the sleek modern studio where millions of viewers eagerly awaited the showdown between Jasmine Crockett and Marjorie Taylor Greene. The audience buzzed with anticipation, their eyes glued to the screen, as the host, David Langston, introduced the guests. Known for his calm demeanor and sharp interviewing skills, Langston wasted no time diving into the heart of the matter. "Welcome, ladies," he began with a warm smile, though his tone hinted at the storm brewing beneath the surface. "Tonight, we're here to discuss some of the most pressing issues facing our country. But before we get started, I understand there's been quite a bit of, let's say, tension between you two recently." Jasmine leaned forward slightly in her chair, her expression poised but guarded. She wore a tailored suit that screamed professionalism, her posture radiating confidence. Beside her, Marjorie sat upright, her lips curled into a faint smirk. Her notebook rested on the table, its pages filled with notes she had meticulously prepared. Both women nodded politely when Langston mentioned the tension, but it was clear neither intended to back down. As the conversation unfolded, Langston guided them through topics like healthcare reform, education funding, and economic recovery. For the first few minutes, everything seemed relatively civil. Jasmine spoke passionately about her vision for underserved communities, while Marjorie countered with arguments about personal responsibility and limited government intervention. It wasn't exactly friendly banter, but it was manageable, until Marjorie decided it was time to strike. "Before we move on," Marjorie interjected suddenly, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "There's something important I need to address." She paused dramatically, locking eyes with Jasmine before turning toward the camera. "Our viewers deserve to know the truth about certain actions taken by my esteemed colleague here." A hush fell over the room. Even Langston looked momentarily taken aback, unsure whether to intervene or let the moment play out. Jasmine stiffened visibly, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "What are you talking about?" she asked sharply, her voice tinged with irritation. Marjorie didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached into her folder and pulled out a stack of papers. Holding them up for the cameras to see, she declared, "These documents reveal questionable financial transactions linked to Ms. Crockett's campaign committee. Specifically, they show illegal transfers made using taxpayer dollars." Gasps rippled through the live audience. Viewers at home scrambled to social media, typing furiously about what they were witnessing. Jasmine's face flushed red, her composure faltering for the first time. "That's ridiculous," she shot back, her voice rising. "Those allegations are baseless, and you know it." But Marjorie wasn't done yet. With an air of calculated precision, she continued, "Not only that, there's evidence suggesting Ms. Crockett used public funds to finance luxury vacations, trips to exotic locations, five-star hotels, all paid for with money meant for community projects." Langston raised a hand, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Ms. Greene, do you have proof of these claims?" he asked cautiously, without hesitation. Marjorie slid the documents across the table toward Jasmine. "Take a look for yourself," she said coolly. "Every detail is right here." Jasmine snatched the papers, scanning them quickly. Her brow furrowed as she flipped through the pages. "This is nonsense," she muttered under her breath, though her voice lacked conviction. Turning to Langston, she insisted, "These documents are fake. Someone forged them to discredit me." Marjorie chuckled dryly, shaking her head. "Forged? Really? Because I happen to have sources who corroborate every single one of these findings. including text messages exchanged between Ms. Crockett and individuals involved in these schemes. At that, Jasmine lost her temper. Slamming her hands on the table, she stood abruptly, pointing an accusing finger at Marjorie. "You crossed a line," she shouted. "How dare you invade my privacy and drag my name through the mud like this?" The audience erupted into murmurs, some cheering for Jasmine's defiance, others applauding Marjorie's boldness. Langston struggled to maintain order, raising his voice to be heard over the commotion. "Ladies, please, let's keep this respectful," he pleaded, though his words barely registered. Marjorie remained unfazed, leaning back in her chair with an air of satisfaction. "Respect goes both ways," she replied smoothly. "If Ms. Crockett wants respect, perhaps she should start by explaining why her campaign finances don't add up." For several tense moments, Jasmine stared daggers at Marjorie, her chest heaving with anger. When she finally spoke again, her tone dripped with venom. "This isn't about accountability, it's about jealousy. You can't stand seeing a strong black woman succeed, so you're trying to tear me down." Marjorie's eyebrows shot up, feigning surprise. "Oh, don't play the victim card now," she retorted. "This has nothing to do with race and everything to do with integrity. If you've done nothing wrong, then prove it." The exchange escalated rapidly, each woman trading barbs faster than Langston could interject. At one point, Jasmine accused Marjorie of orchestrating a witch hunt, while Marjorie fired back, calling Jasmine's accusations desperate attempts to deflect attention from the real issue. By the time the segment ended, both women looked exhausted, their faces flushed and voices hoarse from shouting. Backstage, the tension lingered. Reporters swarmed around them, microphones thrust forward as they tried to capture reactions. Jasmine, still visibly shaken, refused to comment further, brushing past the crowd with her team close behind. Marjorie, however, embraced the chaos, posing for photos and answering questions with unwavering confidence. Social media exploded in the hours that followed. Supporters of both women flooded platforms like Twitter and Instagram, debating the merits of Marjorie's claims versus Jasmine's denials. Hashtags like #Crockett Exposed and #MTG Truth spread like wildfire, dominating trending lists worldwide. Journalists scrambled to fact-check the documents Marjorie presented, while political analysts weighed in on the potential fallout. For many viewers, the confrontation raised more questions than answers. Was Marjorie genuinely exposing wrongdoing, or was this a calculated attack designed to tarnish Jasmine's reputation? And if Jasmine was innocent, why did she seem so defensive? The lack of clarity only fueled speculation, keeping the story alive long after the cameras stopped rolling. Meanwhile, Jasmine retreated to her office, surrounded by trusted advisors. They pored over the documents Marjorie had shared, searching for any hint of forgery or manipulation. Lawyers were called in to assess the legal implications, while PR specialists brainstormed strategies to mitigate damage. Despite the chaos, Jasmine remained adamant. She would not back down without a fight. In the days that followed, the ripple effects of the explosive interview became impossible to ignore. Calls for investigations poured in from all sides, with lawmakers demanding transparency. Some praised Marjorie for shining a light on alleged corruption, while others condemned her methods as reckless and divisive. For Jasmine, the road ahead promised to be rocky, but she wasn't ready to give up just yet. What started as a routine political debate had spiraled into a full-blown scandal, capturing the nation's attention and leaving everyone wondering, who was telling the truth? And more importantly, who would emerge victorious in this high-stakes battle of wills? The fallout from the explosive interview was swift and relentless. Within hours, Jasmine Crockett's name dominated headlines across the country. News outlets dissected every moment of the heated exchange, replaying clips of her shouting match with Marjorie Taylor Greene over and over again. Social media buzzed nonstop as people debated who had come out on top, or if either woman had emerged unscathed. For Jasmine, the weight of the allegations pressed down on her like a storm cloud that refused to break. At first, she tried to rally her supporters. She appeared on several talk shows and podcasts, insisting that the documents Marjorie presented were fabricated and part of a coordinated smear campaign. "They're trying to silence me because I speak truth to power," Jasmine declared during one appearance. her voice cracking with emotion. This isn't about accountability, it's about fear. Fear of progress, fear of change. Her words resonated with some, especially those who already admired her for her boldness and determination. But others weren't convinced. Skeptics pointed out that while Jasmine denied the accusations, she hadn't provided concrete evidence to refute them. Why wouldn't she release her financial records or offer a detailed explanation? To many, her evasiveness only deepened suspicions. Meanwhile, Marjorie Taylor Greene basked in the spotlight. She gave interviews to anyone who would listen, doubling down on her claims and presenting herself as a crusader for transparency. "If you've done nothing wrong, then open your books," she told reporters confidently. "Let the people see the truth for themselves." Her supporters praised her courage, hailing her as a champion of justice willing to take on powerful figures regardless of the backlash. But as the days turned into weeks, cracks began to show in Jasmine's defenses. Anonymous sources started leaking more information to the press, details that painted an increasingly troubling picture. Allegations surfaced about lavish vacations funded by questionable donations, along with whispers of cozy relationships with lobbyists whose interests aligned suspiciously well with certain policy decisions Jasmine had championed. Each new revelation chipped away at her credibility, leaving her scrambling to respond. Jasmine's once unshakable confidence wavered under the mounting pressure. Behind closed doors, she confided in close friends and advisors, admitting that she felt cornered. "I didn't do anything illegal," she insisted repeatedly, though her tone betrayed traces of doubt. Publicly, however, she maintained her defiant stance, refusing to back down even as calls for investigations grew louder. Her team worked tirelessly to craft a narrative that would shift public perception. They emphasized Jasmine's accomplishments, the lives she'd touched, the policies she'd fought for, and framed the controversy as nothing more than baseless attacks from political rivals. Campaign ads flooded television and social media, portraying her as a victim of jealousy and hatred. Yet despite their best efforts, the damage was undeniable. Poll numbers dipped, fundraising slowed, and even some longtime allies began distancing themselves. One particularly painful blow came when a major donor pulled their support, citing concerns about the ongoing scandal. "We can't afford distractions right now," the donor reportedly said in a private meeting. "Until this is resolved, we need to step back." Other donors followed suit, leaving Jasmine's campaign coffers dangerously low. Staff members whispered anxiously about job security, and morale plummeted. Desperate to regain control of the narrative, Jasmine made a bold move. She filed a defamation lawsuit against Marjorie Taylor Greene. The legal action sent shockwaves through the political world, with commentators speculating whether it was a smart strategy or a reckless gamble. On paper, the lawsuit accused Marjorie of spreading false information with malicious intent, seeking damages for harm done to Jasmine's reputation. In reality, it was a Hail Mary pass, a last-ditch effort to reclaim authority in a situation spiraling out of control. Marjorie, unsurprisingly, welcomed the challenge. "Bring it on," she quipped during a live broadcast. "If she thinks suing me will make these allegations go away, she's mistaken. The truth always comes out." As the legal battle loomed, Jasmine found herself increasingly isolated. Allies who had once stood firmly by her side now hesitated to associate too closely with her. Even within her own party, whispers of unease spread. Some suggested she consider stepping aside temporarily to focus on clearing her name. Others urged her to double down and fight harder. The conflicting advice left her feeling more confused and frustrated than ever. To make matters worse, federal investigators announced they were looking into the matter. While no charges had been filed yet, the mere mention of an investigation sent panic rippling through Jasmine's inner circle. Lawyers scrambled to prepare for potential subpoenas, while PR experts brainstormed ways to mitigate the impact of any findings. Every day brought fresh challenges, each one testing Jasmine's resolve. Despite everything, Jasmine refused to disappear quietly. She threw herself into work, attending town halls and community events with renewed vigor. Her speeches grew more impassioned, often bordering on emotional outbursts as she pleaded with audiences to believe in her innocence. "I'm not perfect, I never claimed to be," she admitted during one particularly raw moment. "But I've dedicated my life to fighting for you. Please don't let them tear that apart." Her vulnerability struck a chord with some listeners, reigniting flickers of support among her base. But for every person moved by her words, there were others who remained unconvinced. Critics argued that her dramatic displays were calculated attempts to manipulate public opinion rather than genuine expressions of remorse. As weeks stretched into months, the strain began to show. Dark circles formed under Jasmine's eyes, and her usually polished appearance faltered. Friends noticed she wasn't sleeping well, consumed by anxiety over what might come next. Still, she pushed forward, determined to prove her detractors wrong. In the midst of the chaos, one thing became clear. The confrontation with Marjorie Taylor Greene had changed Jasmine forever. Whether she ultimately triumphed or fell depended largely on how the investigation unfolded. But win or lose, she knew she couldn't return to the way things were before. This was a turning point, a moment that would define not just her career, but her legacy. And so, as the nation waited anxiously for answers, Jasmine Crockett prepared for whatever lay ahead. With grit and determination, she vowed to keep fighting, not just for herself, but for the ideals she believed in. Because in her heart, she still held on to hope that the truth would prevail. The weeks following the explosive interview felt like an eternity for Jasmine Crockett. Every morning she woke up to a barrage of headlines dissecting her every move, or lack thereof. The allegations against her had taken on a life of their own, spreading far beyond political circles and into mainstream conversations at dinner tables, coffee shops, and social gatherings. For someone who thrived in the spotlight, this newfound attention was anything but flattering. Federal investigators began digging deeper into the claims Marjorie Taylor Greene had brought forward. Subpoenas arrived at Jasmine's office, demanding access to financial records, emails, and other documents tied to her campaign activities. Her legal team worked around the clock, combing through years' worth of paperwork to ensure nothing incriminating slipped through the cracks. It was exhausting work, both mentally and emotionally, leaving Jasmine drained and increasingly paranoid. Meanwhile, public opinion continued to shift. Supporters who had once cheered her name now hesitated, unsure whether to believe her denials or trust the mounting evidence against her. Some stuck by her side, organizing rallies and posting messages of solidarity online. They argued that Jasmine was being unfairly targeted because of her race and gender, framing the scandal as yet another example of systemic bias in politics. Others, however, grew skeptical. Even longtime allies started questioning why she hadn't provided clearer answers to refute the allegations. Jasmine knew she couldn't afford to stay silent any longer. She needed to reclaim the narrative before it spiraled completely out of control. With her advisor's guidance, she launched a nationwide tour titled Truth Over Lies, Fighting for Justice. The goal was simple: reconnect with voters, humanize herself, and remind people of the values she stood for. Each stop on the tour featured town halls, speeches, and Q&A sessions, where Jasmine addressed crowds directly, often speaking without notes. At these events, Jasmine poured her heart out. She talked about growing up in a working-class family, struggling to make ends meet and finding purpose in public service. She recounted moments from her career when she'd fought tirelessly for marginalized communities, emphasizing her commitment to fairness and equality. And yes, she acknowledged the controversy surrounding her, but only briefly. "I've been accused of things I didn't do," she told one audience, her voice trembling with emotion. "But I won't let lies define me. I will keep fighting, for you no matter what." Her speeches were powerful, often bringing listeners to tears. Many walked away feeling inspired, convinced that Jasmine was a victim of political warfare, but not everyone bought it. Critics pointed out that while her words were moving, they lacked substance. Where were the concrete explanations? Why hadn't she released her financial records publicly? To them, her refusal to address the specifics only reinforced doubts about her innocence. Behind the scenes, tensions within Jasmine's camp reached a boiling point. Staff members clashed over strategy. with some advocating for full transparency and others urging caution. Donors who had initially stood by her began pulling their support, citing concerns about associating with a figure embroiled in scandal. Key figures in her organization quietly resigned, fearing damage to their own reputations. Morale plummeted, and whispers of doubt spread among those who remained. Desperate to regain momentum, Jasmine decided to write a memoir. Titled Unbroken, My Fight for Justice. The book chronicled her journey from humble beginnings to the national stage. In its pages, she described overcoming adversity, battling corruption, and staying true to her principles despite relentless attacks. She also touched on the recent controversy, framing it as a test of character rather than a reflection of guilt. "They want to break me," she wrote passionately, "but I refuse to be broken." When the memoir hit shelves, it sparked mixed reactions. Supporters praised it as a raw and inspiring account of resilience, snapping up copies and sharing excerpts on social media. Detractors, however, dismissed it as a calculated PR stunt. They argued that Jasmine's vague explanations and emotional appeals did little to counteract the specific allegations against her. Sales figures reflected this divide, with the book performing well in certain markets but failing to achieve widespread success. As the investigation dragged on, leaks continued to trickle out, keeping the story alive in the media. Anonymous sources claimed investigators had uncovered discrepancies in Jasmine's campaign finances, though nothing had been officially confirmed. Rumors swirled about potential charges, prompting endless speculation about what might happen next. The uncertainty weighed heavily on Jasmine, who struggled to maintain her composure under constant scrutiny. One particularly grueling day, after hours of meetings with lawyers and strategists, Jasmine retreated to her home office. Surrounded by stacks of papers and empty coffee cups, she allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability. Tears streamed down her face as she stared blankly at the wall, overwhelmed by the enormity of the situation. For the first time, she wondered if she could survive this ordeal intact. Her husband found her there, sitting in silence amidst the chaos. He knelt beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You've faced harder battles than this," he said softly, "and you've always come out stronger. This is just another chapter, not the end of your story." His words reignited a flicker of determination within her. No matter how dire things seemed, Jasmine refused to give up. She reminded herself why she entered politics in the first place: to make a difference, to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. If she let fear dictate her actions now, she would betray not only her supporters but also the ideals she held dear. With renewed resolve, Jasmine returned to the grind. She intensified her efforts on the Truth Over Lies tour, visiting smaller towns and rural areas where skepticism ran high. She listened to constituents' concerns, answered tough questions, and promised accountability, if not immediately, then soon. Slowly but surely she began rebuilding trust, one community at a time. By this point, the scandal had consumed nearly every aspect of her life. Friends joked that they barely recognized her anymore. The vibrant, confident woman they once knew seemed overshadowed by stress and exhaustion. Yet even in her darkest moments, Jasmine clung to hope. She believed that truth would eventually prevail, that justice would vindicate her if she stayed the course. And so, as the investigation neared its conclusion, Jasmine prepared for whatever lay ahead. Whether it meant facing charges, clearing her name, or something in between, she vowed to meet it head-on, because deep down she still believed in the power of perseverance and in the possibility of redemption. As the investigation into Jasmine Crockett's alleged misconduct entered its final stages, the pressure on her reached a breaking point. Every day felt like walking a tightrope without a safety net. The weight of unanswered questions, mounting scrutiny, and dwindling support pushed her to desperate measures. She knew that if she didn't act quickly, decisively, and creatively, she risked losing everything she had worked so hard to build. Jasmine's first move was to shift her focus from grand gestures to grassroots efforts. Instead of trying to sway national opinion all at once, she zeroed in on local communities. places where people were more likely to listen and less influenced by sensational headlines. Her strategy revolved around showing up, rolling up her sleeves, and proving her commitment through action rather than words alone. She began spending long days visiting small towns and neighborhoods, often skipping meals or sleep to maximize her time. At each stop, she met with residents, listened to their concerns, and offered solutions tailored to their needs. Whether it was advocating for better schools, pushing for affordable housing initiatives, or supporting local businesses, Jasmine positioned herself as someone who cared deeply about everyday struggles. "I'm not here to talk," she told one group of farmers during a town hall meeting. "I'm here to help." Her team helped amplify these efforts by documenting her work and sharing it online. Videos of Jasmine helping elderly residents carry groceries, speaking passionately at community centers, and even joining volunteers to clean up parks flooded social media. These clips weren't polished or scripted, they were raw and authentic, showcasing a side of her many hadn't seen before. For some viewers, this humanized her in ways press conferences and interviews never could. Comment sections filled with messages of encouragement, though skeptics still questioned whether these acts were genuine or merely calculated stunts. But Jasmine didn't stop there. Recognizing the importance of transparency, she took another, bold step, hosting live Q&A sessions on platforms like Instagram and Facebook. During these virtual events, she invited anyone to ask her anything. No topic was off limits. Questions ranged from policy proposals to personal attacks, but Jasmine handled them all with surprising calmness. When pressed about the allegations against her, she admitted feeling frustrated and hurt but reiterated her innocence. "I know I've made mistakes," she said during one session, "but using taxpayer money for personal gain, that's not, who I am." These interactions earned her cautious praise from unlikely corners. Even critics acknowledged that her willingness to engage directly with the public demonstrated courage, a quality many admired, regardless of their stance on the scandal. Slowly but surely, her approval ratings began inching upward, particularly among undecided voters and younger demographics. Still, desperation lingered beneath her outward resilience. With investigators closing in, Jasmine feared that even her best efforts might not be enough to salvage her reputation. In private moments, she confided in close friends, admitting that she sometimes questioned whether continuing to fight was worth it. "What if they don't believe me?" she asked one night, tears streaming down her face. "What if no matter what I do, people see me as guilty?" Her friends reminded her of her strengths, the same qualities that had propelled her to success in the first place. "You didn't get this far by giving up," one friend told her firmly. "If you quit now, you're letting them win. Keep fighting for yourself, for your values, and for everyone who still believes in you." Buoyed by their encouragement, Jasmine doubled down on her efforts. She announced plans to introduce sweeping reforms aimed at increasing accountability in campaign financing, a move widely interpreted as an attempt to distance herself from the accusations while addressing a broader issue. Critics dismissed it as opportunistic, but supporters hailed it as proof of her dedication to change. "This isn't just about me," Jasmine explained during a press conference. "It's about ensuring that no one else has to endure what I've been through because of loopholes or lack of oversight." Despite her growing momentum, challenges persisted. Anonymous leaks continued to surface, keeping the scandal alive in the public consciousness. One particularly damaging report claimed investigators had uncovered evidence linking Jasmine to questionable donations from lobbyists. While unverified, the story reignited debate over her integrity and overshadowed her recent accomplishments. To combat this, Jasmine leaned heavily on emotional appeals. She gave a series of impassioned speeches highlighting her journey, from humble beginnings to becoming a voice for the voiceless, and framing the scandal as part of a larger battle against systemic injustice. "They want to silence me because I refuse to back down," she declared during one such address. "But I won't let them win. Not today, not ever." Her words resonated with many, especially those who identified with her underdog narrative. Supporters rallied behind her, organizing fundraisers, creating fan art, and flooding social media with hashtags like Marjorie stand with Jasmine and Tarn truth prevails. Yet even amid this resurgence of goodwill, cracks in her foundation remained visible. Key allies within her party quietly distanced themselves, fearing association with potential fallout. Donors hesitated to contribute and staff turnover increased as uncertainty loomed. In a final bid to regain control of the narrative, Jasmine released a short documentary titled Unyielding: The Fight Continues, produced by an independent filmmaker. The film chronicled her rise to prominence, her struggles with adversity, and her ongoing battle to clear her name. It featured candid interviews with family members, friends, and constituents, painting a portrait of a woman determined to persevere, despite overwhelming odds. The documentary premiered at a high-profile film festival, earning standing ovations and sparking conversations about resilience and redemption. While the film received critical acclaim, its impact on public perception was mixed. Some praised it as a powerful testament to endurance, while others dismissed it as overly sentimental propaganda. Regardless, it succeeded in keeping Jasmine's story relevant, ensuring that she remained a central figure in political discourse. As the investigation drew to a close, Jasmine prepared for the inevitable outcome. Investigators had hinted at an upcoming announcement, though details remained scarce. Friends and advisors urged her to brace for the worst-case scenario, but Jasmine refused to dwell on negativity. Instead, she focused on staying grounded, leaning on her faith, and reminding herself of why she entered politics in the first place. Late one evening, as she sat alone in her study reviewing notes for an upcoming speech, Jasmine reflected on how much she had changed since the scandal erupted. Gone was the confident, unshakable leader who believed charisma alone could conquer any obstacle. In her place stood someone wiser, humbler, and more aware of both her strengths and vulnerabilities. Whatever happened next, she knew she would face it with dignity and purpose. The nation held its breath, waiting to hear the results of the investigation. For Jasmine, the coming days would determine not only her future but also the legacy she left behind. Redemption or ruin, it was a choice she hoped to make on her own terms, guided by the principles she had always championed. The day finally arrived when the results of the investigation were set to be announced. It was a moment that had been looming over Jasmine Crockett for months, casting a shadow over every decision she made and every step she took. The nation waited with bated breath, glued to their screens as news anchors prepared to deliver what promised to be a pivotal update in one of the most dramatic political scandals in recent memory. Jasmine woke early that morning, her stomach churning with nerves. She hadn't slept well, not that anyone could blame her. For weeks she had rehearsed speeches, both optimistic and somber, knowing she might need either depending on the outcome. Her team gathered around her at her campaign headquarters, offering quiet words of encouragement. There was no playbook for moments like this. All they could do was stand by her side and hope for the best. At exactly 10 a.m., federal investigators held a press conference to share their findings. The room buzzed with reporters clamoring for answers, microphones thrust forward as cameras rolled. When the lead investigator stepped up to the podium, the tension in the air was palpable. After a brief introduction, he delivered the verdict. While there were irregularities in Jasmine's campaign finances, they did not rise to the level of criminal wrongdoing. However, he added sternly, there are serious concerns about transparency and accountability within Ms. Crockett's operations. We urge reforms to prevent similar issues in the future. For Jasmine, the ruling was neither a complete victory nor an outright defeat. On one hand, she avoided criminal charges, a fact her supporters immediately seized upon, declaring her vindicated. On the other hand, the criticism of her financial practices left lingering doubts about her judgment and integrity. Critics pounced on the report, accusing her of skating by on technicalities rather than proving her innocence outright. Social media exploded once again, with hashtags like "cleared but not clean" and "justice denied" trending alongside messages of support. Back at Diadem, her headquarters, Jasmine exhaled deeply, allowing herself a brief moment of relief before addressing her staff. "This isn't the end," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the exhaustion etched on her face. "We've been given a second chance, and I intend to use it wisely." Her team nodded, though some exchanged uneasy glances. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. While the absence of criminal charges removed the immediate threat of legal consequences, rebuilding trust would take time and effort. In the days that followed, Jasmine wasted no time putting her plan into action. She announced sweeping changes to her campaign's financial management system, including third-party audits and stricter guidelines for donations. She also proposed legislation aimed at increasing transparency across all political campaigns, framing it as a way to hold herself and others accountable moving forward. "If we're going to restore faith in our institutions," she declared during a televised address, "we need to lead by example." Her opponents weren't convinced. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who had remained relatively quiet throughout the investigation, seized the opportunity to reiterate her stance. "Just because you didn't break the law doesn't mean you acted ethically," she tweeted. "Ms. Crockett may have avoided jail time, but history will remember her actions." Supporters of both women clashed online, reigniting debates about justice, fairness, and accountability. Despite the ongoing criticism, Jasmine pressed on. She refocused her energy on grassroots organizing, doubling down on her efforts to connect with everyday people. Town halls became her primary platform, where she listened intently to constituents' concerns and worked collaboratively to find solutions. These events weren't just about winning votes, they were about earning back trust, one conversation at a time. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. While skepticism lingered among some, others started to see Jasmine in a new light. Her willingness to acknowledge mistakes, albeit indirectly, and commit to meaningful change resonated with voters weary of empty promises. Poll numbers crept upward, signaling a cautious resurgence in her popularity. Donors tentatively returned, encouraged by her renewed focus on reform and community engagement. Yet even as momentum shifted in her favor, Jasmine couldn't shake the feeling that she'd emerged from the ordeal forever changed. The scandal had stripped away layers of confidence and forced her to confront vulnerabilities she'd long buried beneath ambition. Late at night, sitting alone in her study, she reflected on how far she'd come, and how much farther she still had to go. "I thought I was invincible," she admitted to herself quietly. "But maybe vulnerability is part of strength too." Her personal growth wasn't lost on those closest to her. Friends remarked on how much more grounded she seemed, trading bravado for humility and listening instead of lecturing. Even critics begrudgingly acknowledged that Jasmine appeared genuinely committed to turning over a new leaf. Though forgiveness wouldn't come overnight, her perseverance earned her a measure of respect even from unlikely quarters. As months passed, Jasmine reinvented herself, not as a larger-than-life figure, but as someone determined to make a difference on a smaller scale. She shifted her focus away from national politics, choosing instead to champion local causes and mentor young activists eager to create change. Her memoir, Unbroken: My Fight for Justice, became required reading in classrooms, sparking discussions about resilience, ethics, and the complexities of leadership. Meanwhile, Marjorie Taylor Greene continued to dominate headlines with her trademark boldness. Though her exposé hadn't resulted in criminal charges against Jasmine, she framed the investigation as proof of her commitment to rooting out corruption. Supporters hailed her as a watchdog, unafraid to challenge powerful figures, while detractors accused her of exploiting controversy for personal gain. Regardless of opinion, her role in the saga cemented her status as a polarizing yet influential force in politics. Years later, historians would look back on the clash between Jasmine Crockett and Marjorie Taylor Greene as a defining moment in modern political history. It wasn't just a battle between two women. It was a reflection of broader tensions surrounding power, accountability, and public trust. Both women emerged transformed by the experience, their legacies intertwined in ways neither could have anticipated. For Jasmine, redemption came not through grand gestures, but through steady, deliberate action. She learned that leadership wasn't about being infallible. It was about owning your flaws, learning from them, and striving to do better. And though scars remained, she carried them as reminders of lessons hard-earned. The story didn't end with triumph or tragedy. It ended somewhere in between, a testament to the messy, unpredictable nature of life itself. As Jasmine stood on stage at a community center years later, surrounded by smiling faces and heartfelt applause, she realized something profound. Sometimes survival is its own kind of victory.